Hey everybody, how's it going? Hexbro here. So today I wanted to go over a deck that is near and dear to my heart, and that I actually had a lot of fun playing back in the day, and that is Ice Barrier. There's a little bit of a story behind this deck. This is one of the first decks where I didn't just like net deck it, or I didn't just like go, oh, it's a structure deck, I'll build it. Way back in the day, like back when Hulk was out and legal, I started getting into Yu-Gi-Oh! More seriously, and Ice Barrier was one of the first decks that I took, and I went, okay, this is a deck that my friend group doesn't believe in, and thinks that they'll summon a single monster and pass turn. They think it's terrible. So I spent a good amount of time researching how to build Ice Barrier, and I spent a good amount of time looking into how to play Ice Barrier, and I built this. This has been modified somewhat. Hulk isn't in it, obviously, but this is what I currently have IRL. This is bad, but back in the day when we were playing with friends, this was enough. However, these days, there's a bunch of new support that came out, and so we're able to build Ice Barriers much better than we could back in the day when we were running 3 of a tribute monster. I know he's got a special summon condition, but like, all intents and purposes, turn 1, he's a tribute monster. So, I want to go over a little bit about what the deck's aiming to do. I want to go over the card by card, and then we'll go through some test hands, and we'll see how the deck plays. First off, I want to talk about the deck's goal. Ice Barrier is a deck that's most famous for Trishula, Dragon of the Ice Barrier. This monster was a menace back in the day and part of a lot of meta strategies. This card has seen time on the limited list, I believe limited to 1 for the longest time. Back when I was building Ice Barrier, I could only play 1 Trish. Trishula's really good, but Ice Barrier has a history of being bad. If I look up real quick, Ice Barrier, a lot of these monsters in here, like Geomancer, have really niche effects that are not particularly useful in most decks. But there's just kind of like a lot of weird lockdown effects on a bunch of weird Ice Barrier monsters, but there was no good way to swarm the field with them. You may notice that this guy's actually in our side deck for this one. Warlock has a lock effect where both players have to set spell cards before activating them and cannot activate them until the next turn. That's a really good floodgate, but Ice Barrier as an archetype didn't have any way to consistently get more than 1 guy on the field per turn, much less go into its own synchro monsters. So it wasn't able to access Brionic, it wasn't able to access Gungear, it wasn't able to access Trishula, because you would have a single summon 99% of the time, maybe 2 if you use Prior, and you just kind of have to pass. It was part of a slower format of Yu-Gi-Oh!, and even then, it was objectively one of the worst decks in the game. Now, Ice Barriers had a structure deck that fixed a lot of the problems by making it to where you can actually summon Trishula on your turn. It's also started to synergize a lot more with a lot of generic water support, such as Bahamut Shark and Icejades Ran. I'm not even going to attempt names I know I can't pronounce properly. But it started synergizing with a lot more water support, and it's gotten a lot more options over time. So let's go into the card by card and talk about what we're aiming to do with this deck and what these cards are actually doing together. I'm actually going to skip over this first little collection here, and I'm going to start with Revealer of the Ice Barrier. This is a key combo piece and is the starter for a lot of Ice Barrier plays. While you control another Ice Barrier monster, your opponent cannot tribute summon. This is a weird little floodgate that Revealer has. It doesn't come up very often, but if you're fighting something like True Draco, which my friend used to mainline, this deck just had a weird counter to it. It's funny. It occasionally comes up, but very often it will not. This level 4 allows you to, once per turn, you can discard a card, special summon an Ice Barrier tuner from your deck. Also, you cannot special summon monsters for the rest of the turn, except for water monsters. Additionally, if you would discard or send a card from your hand to the graveyard to activate an Ice Barrier monster's effect, you can banish this card from your graveyard instead for one of those cards. Revealer is the entirety of a synchro monster with any other card in hand. With Revealer, you can discard to special summon a level 3 or a level 1. There's also level 2 tuners, but we're not running them in this deck. But you can special summon them to go into stuff like Brionic, which has a discard effect, Gungear, which has a discard effect, or actually in this deck I think that's literally it. So moving on from Revealer, this is the starter of the deck. Speaker is the most common best card to have with Revealer in your hand. Speaker's effect is, while you control another Ice Barrier, defense position monsters your opponent control cannot change their battle positions. You can only use the rest of these effects once per turn. If you control an Ice Barrier monster, you can actually special summon this card from your hand. And if you control an Ice Barrier monster, you can banish this card from your graveyard to special summon an Ice Barrier token, which is an Aqua level 1 monster token with 0 attack and defense. Speaker's effect is great. Special summoning it alongside Revealer means that when Revealer discards, you can immediately go into something like Trishula, or their bigger card, Trishula 0, which is an 11, if you get out Defender, or Trishula if you get out Hexa. Again, we'll get into these cards later. But this effect also allows you to make link materials. It also allows you to guarantee that there's another Ice Barrier monster, so that the floodgates the Ice Barriers have will always go off by banishing this card from grave. It's a really good combo piece. Additionally, because Revealer's a 4 and Speaker's a 4, you can go into the random XYZs we have in this deck. Bahamut Shark into Toadally Awesome, or Stealth Kraken, or Abyss Dweller. We'll get into these cards later, but just know that this guy plus this guy represents whatever end board you really need for the Ice Barrier line. Revealer's discarding a card and summoning a tuner. What are the tuners? Defender with the Ice Barrier is a Aqua Tuner level 3. While you control another Ice Barrier monster, monsters your opponent controls cannot declare an attack if their attack is greater than or equal to this card's defense. Don't tell your opponent you're using this effect. Like, don't tell your opponent you have this. Just let them build up to the battle phase, try to swing at you, and then realize they can't because this guy's defense is 1600. Like, this has come up in a couple games where people just aren't paying attention to what Ice Barriers are doing. Don't announce passive effects like Defender or Speaker until they like randomly come up in the duel. But yeah, Defender is a good body. He's a level 3, so he gives you access to a lot of your stuff. He gives you access to the 7s, and he gives you access to the 11s, depending on what you have on the field, through just the Ice Barrier line at least. But he's a good guy. He's a good boy. This is a good dog. Hexa, Spirit of the Ice Barrier, is someone I refer to as Squishy Boy all the time. He looks squishy. I feel like if you grab him, you could squish him, and he'd like stick his tongue out. He's cute. I like Hexa. He's the best Ice Barrier. Hexa, Spirit of the Ice Barrier, is a level 1 tuner. While you control another Ice Barrier monster, monsters your opponent controls lose 500 attack and defense. During your main phase, you can send one level 3 or lower Ice Barrier monster from your deck to your graveyard, and if you do, this card's level becomes the same level as that monster's until the end of the turn. It means if you just have Hexa on field, you can send Defender to the graveyard to actually copy its level. I like Defender, but Hexa's ability is really strong because if you need a 1, you have a 1. If you need a 3, you have a 3. And if you need a 2, you can go get a 2. This allows you to send a 2 from deck to grave, and we have a single monster that's a 2. I'm going to profess to you that I have drawn Sujin in my opening hand more times than I can count playing this deck, both IRL and in Simulator. For some reason, this guy just loves being in your hand. So I'm debating taking out a single Defender and just running 2 of this guy, so I stopped drawing him. Zujin of the Ice Barrier is a Garnet. This is a card you want in your deck, so you can send it with Hexa. It has effects, but importantly, it's a level 2 Ice Barrier, so that's the reason you run him primarily. However, this guy over other Ice Barriers actually has other effects. You can tribute this card, special summon level 5 or higher Ice Barrier monster from your hand. There's one of those in this deck, and his effect will not come up very often. In fact, I didn't realize this was even an effect this guy had because his graveyard effect is just better. If this card is in your graveyard, except the turn it was sent there, you can target one level 3 or higher water monster you control, reduce its level by exactly 2, and if you do, special summon this card, but banish it when it leaves the field. This second effect is the reason why you run it with Hexa, and it's the reason why you run it over like the level 2 tuners that you could be running also. This guy's effect allows you to, after you've already survived a turn, go ahead and rebuild your board. You can go into a link, you can reduce the levels of things to help with your synchro plays. Zujin does a lot, but he does nothing if he's in your opening hand. He then becomes discard fodder, and like it's really bad. Again, you might be able to cut a Defender and throw in a second Zujin just to prevent Hexa's level 2 effect from being completely dead at all times. But that's kind of up to preference. If you find Zujin isn't in your opening hand like my luck has been, like you should be fine. But with my luck, half the games I play, he's in my opening hand, I just can't access 6s. General Wayne of the Ice Barrier is an Ice Barrier monster I should probably mention as well. Spells and traps sent from the field to your opponent's graveyard are banished instead. This doesn't require an Ice Barrier monster to be on field to also activate it. This is just an inherent thing that Wayne has. Wayne, however, is a level 5. So, once per turn, if your opponent controls a monster and you control an Ice Barrier monster, you can special summon this card from your hand. That is incredibly useful. It's not so useful that I run it at 3 anymore, because if I'm going first, then my opponent probably doesn't have anything on the field, but this is still a useful effect. Especially since, if this card is normal or special summoned, you can add 1 Ice Barrier spell trap from your deck to your hand. Going into those spell traps real quick, we're running 3 of them: Winds, Freezing Chains, and Medallion. Medallion has a very simple effect. It's a normal spell. Add 1 Ice Barrier monster from your deck to your hand. This allows you to search for your entire archetype. It allows you to grab Revealer if you need it. It allows you to grab Speaker if you need it. If the situation's right, it allows you to grab Wayne. This is a really easy, non-once per turn searcher for your entire deck. It's really good. You run it at 3, you run it at 6 if you could. It's great. Medallion is one of the best cards in Ice Barrier. If this was printed back when Ice Barrier was one of the worst archetypes, and now that it's actually playable, it's good. I like it. It's a very good consistency booster. Wins over the Ice Barrier is another consistency booster. You contribute any number of Ice Barrier monsters, special summon from your deck that many level 4 or lower Ice Barrier monsters with different names from each other. This is another way to, once you've got a couple cards on field, if they're not the ones you want, or they're not the ones you need, or like you have Speaker on field and you prefer to use its graveyard effects later on, you can always tribute that monster to go and grab Revealer from deck, or grab whatever else you need that's level 4 or lower from deck. During your main phase, except the turn this card was sent to the graveyard, you can banish it, then target an Ice Barrier monster that's banished or in your graveyard and add it to your hand. This also allows for pretty good recycling around the same time that Zujin will allow itself to activate its effects. So as long as you can survive to the third turn, or like your second turn, you are fine. This deck is pretty good at going first. It's pretty decent at going second, but Winds and Zujin and cards like it allow you to recycle resources as the game goes on so that you're never too starved for materials, which can be a problem when you have like 2 card combos with Revealer and as we'll get into stuff like Icejade and Abyss Shark. We're also running 2 Freezing Chains of the Ice Barrier. When it's activated, you can target a level 4 or lower Ice Barrier monster in your graveyard, special summon it. While you control 3 or more Ice Barrier monsters, Ice Barriers you control are unaffected by the activated effects of opponent's monsters that were special summoned from the extra deck. Freezing Chains of the Ice Barrier is Monster Reborn, and additionally, if you control 3 Ice Barriers, your opponent's extra deck just stops affecting your deck. This can be devastating against the right matchup. If you discard an Ice Barrier monster with Revealer, or you tribute it with Winds over the Ice Barrier, something like Freezing Chain can bring it back. The revival effect is once per turn, and having 2 Freezing Chains on the field because they're continuous, like, it doesn't do anything extra for you, but this is another way to start recovering your game, and it's pretty useful. A little side note as well, Revealer's effect requires you to discard a card to special summon an Ice Barrier tuner. If you have Revealer in your graveyard, you can actually banish the Revealer to special summon that tuner as well. So if you have 2 Revealers, 1 in grave, 1 on field, you can use Revealer in grave to special summon a 2 lunar with the Revealer in field. That's pretty useful. So that's kind of it for the Ice Barrier core in the main deck. However, we are running a bunch of other stuff. So first things first, the Abyss Sharks. These guys are used to go into your XYZs 90% of the time, but it's also a level 5 body that's useful for synchro plays if you want to just summon Hexa and special summon the Abyss Shark. What does Abyss Shark do? This card can be used for the XC summon of a number monster, and if it is, its level can be treated as 3 or 4 for a number monster. If all monsters you control are water, minimum 1, you can special summon this card from your hand, and if you do, add a level 3, 4, or 5 fish monster from your deck to your hand, except for itself. For the rest of this turn, you cannot special summon except for water monsters. Also double the first battle damage inflicted to your opponent by number monsters battling another monster. You can only use this effect Abyss Shark once per turn. Abyss Shark is actually really good. You can normal summon any other monster in your deck because all your monsters besides Ash Blossom are water monsters. You can special summon this guy from hand and then add 1 of 2 fish that we're running in this deck to continue on with your plays. If you have something like Revealer or Speaker on the field, it'll allow you to go into number 4, Stealth Kraken. If you already have something like Hexa or Defender on the field, it'll allow you to quickly go into a 6 or go into one of your 8s. And it waterlocks you the same way that Revealer does, so your deck's already built around being waterlocked, so it's fine. The cards you can grab with Abyss Shark in this deck are twofold. One is Mini Aruki. This is a fish level 4, and when a water monster's effect is activated, quick effect, you can special summon this card from your hand. You can banish 1 face-up fish, sea serpent, or aqua monster you control, then target a face-up card on the field and negate its effects until the end of your opponent's turn. This second effect is niche and doesn't really come up, but if you activate a effect while this card is in your hand of one of your water monsters, this can include effects in hand, such as Icejade, Ran, which we'll get into. Conversely, I used to run Silent Angler in the main deck in paper, and I actually wanted to re-include him here because he's searchable. Silent Angler is a fish water monster. If you control a water monster, you can special summon this card from your hand. That's great. However, he does stop it to where you cannot special summon monsters from your hand for the rest of the turn after you use Silent Angler. This is fine as your last special summon from hand, which is very often just going to be that or Mini, so it's fine. I mean, that's not really an issue. And this is a lot more flexible than Mini because you don't actually have to activate a water monster's effect to be able to go off. You just special summon him from hand. I'd maybe run this at 2, but if you have 2 Silent Anglers, 1 in your hand, and then you search one with Abyss Shark, you'll lock the other one at a special summoning, so it is fine to do it this way. This is useful. If you summon Hexa, you can go into synchros using a 5 and a 4. This will get you to 5 plus 4 plus 1. That'll get you to 10 pretty easily, which in future will be this cool looking Ice Barrier guy. In present is probably going to be this Icejade here, which again we'll get to later. But yeah, this is useful. It's also very useful for going into XYZs plays if you control a revealer or a speaker already. Additionally, we're running a very small little Icejade engine. This is a 2-card combo that immediately gets you into this level 10 Icejade I keep looking at. Icejade Ran. Its name changes while it's equipped with an equipped card. I don't care what its name change does. Icejade Ran is a level 7 tuner, and you can discard one other Icejade card or a water monster, special summon this card from your hand. Then you can special summon an Icejade token that's a level 3 aqua water monster. While the token's in the monster zone, you are waterlocked from the extra deck. That's fine. Again, we're only playing waters in the extra. This is a level 7 tuner that special summons its own 3 to immediately go into Icejade Gamir. Icejade Gamir is a water synchro that's a level 10. That is 1 water tuner to 1 non-tuner monster. In quick effect, you can activate this. Face-up monsters your opponent controls cannot be destroyed or banished by your opponent's card effects this turn. Then, if you activated this effect in response to your opponent's card activation or effect, and your opponent has that card with its name on the field in our graveyard, you can banish those cards. If a card is banished by your opponent's card effect while this card is in your graveyard, you can special summon it. This is really weird and convoluted way to say this, but in practice, this is a really good defensive tool. And this, plus any water monster in hand, immediately brings you to this guy. So this is very often part of end boards, just because it's really easy to get out. And we're also running 3 Icejade Cradle. Add 1 Icejade monster from your deck to your hand with a different name for the cards you control or in your graveyard. This is also kind of like Medallion, where you can just add a monster from your deck to your hand. This one has some limitations. It has to be a different name than the ones you control or in your grave. But if you have like 2 Cradle in hand, nothing else, you can just play both the Cradles to add 2 Icejade Rans to your hand. And because you don't control them yet, you're not locked out of being able to search them. Later on in the game, if this is like your top deck, this isn't great, but being able to add like all 3 copies to your hand immediately is fine. Additionally, if you already have like 2 copies in your hand and 2 copies of Cradle, you can use this thing's effect to discard the Cradle because this is looking for a water monster or an Icejade card. So you can just discard this as well if needs be. One of the last little engines we're actually using, and you may have noticed it, and it may have looked a little weird to you, is a single penguin soldier. Flip monster. You can target 2 monsters on the field, return those targets to the hand. Why are we running penguin soldier, you might ask? Great question. The answer is penguin brave. So, this was the part of the deck where I think someone suggested it to me before, and I went, nah, that's a stupid idea. Why would I run penguins? Now I think that's really funny, so I'm running penguins. 1 tuner plus 1 or more non-tuner monsters. Penguin Grave is a level 6 synchro. Your opponent cannot target face-down defense position monsters you control with card effects. You can only use each of the following effects of Penguin Brave once per turn. If it's secret summoned, you can special summon a penguin monster from your deck in face-down defense position. When your opponent activates a monster effect, quick effect, you can flip 1 face-down defense position water monster you control face-up. This means that you can summon Penguin Brave, special summon Penguin Soldier in face-down defense position, and then flip it up to bounce 2 monsters on the field after your opponent activates a monster effect. Is this good? It's better than summoning Brionic. When I was doing test hands, a lot of the times my end boards would be Icejade Gamir and Penguin Brave if I went first. Icejade Gamir to protect my field, and then Penguin Brave to actually have a piece of interaction that bounces stuff. It allowed for a single banish based on chaining, and then also a bounce of 2 monsters potentially from the opponent's side of the field, which is pretty alright. This is a pretty decent end board. We're also going to be using the other guys in here as well as good end board interactions, but yeah, just as a basic synchro line, Penguin Brave and Icejade Gamir, perfectly fine. And Penguin Brave is really cute, and Penguin Soldier is a card that I used to use as a kid. It's fun sometimes being able to play like old cards from your childhood and being able to incorporate them in newer decks. Additionally, we have 6 non-engine, well, 7, but we have 6 like hand trap slots. We're running 3 copies of Ash Blossom and Joyous Spring. When a card effect is activated, that includes adding a card from the deck to hand, special summoning from the deck, or sending a card from deck to graveyard. You can discard Ash Blossom and Joyous Spring to negate it, and that's a once per turn. This is just a basic, if your opponent activates Branded Fusion, if your opponent activates one of the pot cards, if your opponent tries to activate Foolish Burial, you can just negate that. Very powerful hand trap, always been powerful, always been good. Its price has gone down from the $10, $20 it used to be. It's a great card. It's easy to recommend Ash Blossom as your generic hand trap of choice. We're also running 3 Book of Moon. It's a quick play spell card. Target 1 face-up monster on the field, change it to face-down defense position. Also a really good card. Also perfectly fine to use. You can sub this out for other hand traps if you realize your opponent's playing like Labyrinth or something, or there's just playing something where Book of Moon doesn't matter as much. We're also running a single copy of Called by the Grave. Target one monster in your opponent's graveyard, banish it, and if you do, until the end of the next turn, its effects are negated, as well as the activated effects and effects of monsters on the field with the same original name. This is useful because it'll attack your opponent's hand traps. This is like a single card out, it's just something like Ash Blossom, or Effect Veiler, or Droll Lockbird, that I'll send to grave or discard their card to do their effects. This is just a good way to counter that. Additionally, this is super flexible, so if it's not a hand trap that you're threatened by, or there's just some monster in the graveyard that you're threatened by, you can just get rid of it, and it's gone for a while. So that's pretty useful too. We have all these guys on field. We're summoning tuners, we're summoning level 4s, we're talking about going into XYZs and synchros, but what are we actually going into? Starting with the synchro line, we've already talked about Penguin Brave, he's a level 6 synchro. We also have Brionic, Dragon of the Ice Barrier. This is a tuner, non-tuner, level 6. This is also water. All these guys in the extra deck are water. All these guys in the main deck are pretty much water too, besides Ash Blossom, who's a fire. Brionic, its effect is that you can discard any number of cards to the graveyard and target the same number of cards your opponents control. Return those cards to the hand. Again, you can use Revealer from the graveyard as one of the cards to discard. And this is non-destruction removal. This is very useful in some matchups. For example, if you're playing against like Unchained or something, instead of proccing the destruction effect to Unchained monsters, you can just bounce the Unchained monsters and make them leave the field that way. Brionic's really good. It's not great going first because it's not a quick effect, but it's a really powerful way to break boards. Most of the Ice Barrier monsters are going to be like that, by the way. Not really the best cards going first, but really good at breaking boards to the point where, like, if you're going first, you're going into non-Ice Barrier monsters, and if you're going second, you're probably going into the Ice Barriers. Case in point, Gungear, Dragon of the Ice Barrier, is a level 7 synchro, and once per turn, you can discard 2 cards to the graveyard to target the same number of monsters your opponent controls and destroy them. Very similar effect to Brionic, but it's just level 7 as opposed to a level 6. This makes it easier to get out with like Revealer and Defender. It's just more generically accessible, but it is a destruction effect and it's limited to 2 cards your opponent controls as opposed to any number of them. We also have Trishula, Dragon of the Ice Barrier. This is a tuner and 2 or more non-tuner monsters. When this card is synchro summoned, you can banish up to 1 card from your opponent's hand, field, and graveyard. The card from hand is chosen at random. This is what the deck used to do going first, just generically, is you would summon Trishula, and then you would just rip a card from the opponent's hand. The reason it was on the ban list was because some decks could do this 3 times, either recycling Trishulas or card summoning Trishula every time, and then we'd rip 3 cards from the opponent's hand, like going first. It was insane. That is not consistent anymore, and Ice Barriers are not set up to do that. That hand ripping nonsense is not what this deck is going for. Trishula is a really good board breaker. You can banish a card from the graveyard that's causing protection effects or causing you problems. A card from hand to stop like a random hand trap that hasn't been used, or just get rid of something randomly from your opponent's like ability to recover. And field to disrupt plays. You are not often going to actually be summoning Trishula, but it's always an option you can go into. More often, you'll be summoning Trishula, Zero Dragon of the Ice Barrier. This is that newer card that was released with the structure deck and is kind of a really good boss monster. Trishula, Zero Dragon of the Ice Barrier, is a level 11 synchro monster that requires 1 tuner and 2 or more non-tuner materials. And then, when this card is synchro summoned, you can banish up to 3 cards your opponent controls. This is going to be just from the field, unlike the original Trishula. However, this is a much stronger board breaker, assuming your opponent has most of its power just on board. Banishing 3, non-targeting, is really good, and will catch people off guard. If this synchro summon card in its owner's control is destroyed by an opponent's card, you can special summon Trishula Dragon from the Ice Barrier from your extra deck or graveyard. Its attack becomes 3,300, then have the attack of any face-up monsters your opponent currently controls, and negate their effects. What Trishula Zero Dragon does is it allows you to wipe out a board, and if for some reason Zero Dragon is dead, it allows you to float into Trishula as a super big beater that also really hurts the opponent's field. It negates all their monsters, and it like halves their attack. All of that's really good as a floating effect, and the fact that this boss monster will float back into Trishula is like really impressive. It's a really good card, and it's what made like my Ice Barrier deck back in the day actually still work, because Trishula Zero is just a bunch of nonsense. For non-Ice Barrier monsters in the Synchro engine, we're actually running Icejades Jumir, Penguin Brave, and we're running White Aura Whale and Emancipator Risen Dragonite. White Aura Whale is another going second card, and it's your going second level 8. I will note, not many of these cards actually pass $10 in cost. Like, this is a $50 main deck, but like $50 for 40 cards is fine. White Aura Whale is one of the few cards that's kind of pricey. It's still like $11 to get one of these. It's a level 8 synchro. It's a water tuner and 1 non-tuner water monster. When this card is synchro summoned, you can destroy all opponents' attack position monsters. This is non-targeting, just blanket destruction of things that are in attack position, which is pretty good. This card can make up to 2 attacks on monsters during each battle phase. In case your opponent put their stuff in defense position, this can ram into their defense position monsters twice. If this card attacks a defense position monster, it also gets to do piercing damage, so it does punish the opponent for trying to proactively defend against its destruction effect. And if this card you control is destroyed by an opponent's card by battle or card effect and sent to your graveyard, you can banish a water monster, special summon it, and if you do, it becomes a tuner. It doesn't activate its board wipe again, because it has to be synchro summoned for the board wipe, but this big guy will just keep coming back because your entire deck is water monsters, so you can always banish more things for the White Aura Whale. All the White Aura cards actually work this way, where you can banish waters from your graveyard to special summon them back, but Whale is going to be the best one, because Ice Barriers do not have an explicit level 8 target. They have a 6, a 7, and a 9, but they do not have an 8. So we're running this guy for going second, and if we're going first, we're running Animancipator Risen Dragonite. This might seem kind of weird. This is an entirely different archetype, and it's a rock monster, so it doesn't really synergize with the typings. However, this is a water monster for no discernible reason, so we get to play it in our deck. And it's actually good. Animancipator Risen Dragonite is a rock synchro that's a level 8. It requires a tutor and 1 or more non-tutor monsters. During your main phase, you can excavate the top 5 cards of this deck, and if you do, you can return cards your opponent controls up to the number of excavated rock monsters. I will note, this is almost completely useless, unless you cited Nibiru, in which case it becomes a removal ability. It's not consistent, and I don't recommend it, but it sure is a thing you can do. The more important effect is its second one. When your opponent activates a spell trap card or effect, while a water monster is in your graveyard, quick effect, you can negate the activation if you do destroy it. This is a spell trap negation and destruction effect. That is the main reason why you're running Dragonite, because you actually don't have a ton of negates in this deck. This is like one of 2 negates, I believe, in the entirety of the deck. We'll get into the XYZs line later, who's holding the other one. But yeah, Dragonite's just a really good generic tool. It's always been a really good generic tool. It's always filled a slot that Ice Barriers have been unable to fill themselves. If you're curious how to get into it, you control Wayne and I think Defender, and you can go into Dragonite. Additionally, because of the Abyss Shark being a level 5, Abyss Shark plus Defender will get you into Dragonite as well. So there are a few extra lines that you can go down to easily sneak your way into Dragonite. For the synchros, that is it. However, we are still running a Link monster and a bunch of XYZs. For the XYZs, we're running Bahamut Shark. This requires 2 level 4 water monsters. Once per turn, you can detach a material, special summon a rank 3 or lower water monster XYZ monster from your extra deck. That's pretty strong, especially since Toadally Awesome's still in the game. Toad is a staple of every water deck. Bahamut Shark summoning Toad is a very basic piece of end-board interaction that most water decks will attempt to go into. This deck is water, and it summons enough 4s to where you can still go into it. Toadally Awesome. We're ignoring its summoning condition. It's a water XYZ. Once per turn during the standby phase, you can detach material, special summon a frog. This is a frog card. Ignore the frog card part of this. It doesn't matter. Once per turn, when your opponent activates a spell trap card or monster effect, quick effect, you can send an aqua monster from your hand or face up on the field to the graveyard, negate its activation. If you do, destroy it, then you can set it to your field. This is a Omni negate that allows you to steal whatever your opponent was trying to use. Additionally, because this is an aqua, you can send itself to the graveyard to actually fulfill its condition. And if this card is sent to the graveyard, you can target a water monster in your graveyard, add it to your hand. This allows you to do one of 2 things. You can recycle Toad, using it attributing itself to negate and steal a card, and then put it back into the extra deck so you can summon it next turn off of Bahamut Shark again. Or you can use it to do the negate and then recycle one of your water monsters that you used to get it out to be able to set up for next turn plays. It's a really good card. Even with the new support that's coming out for Ice Barrier, I'd still probably run Bahamut Shark and Toad just because it's so consistent. We are also running Number 4, Stealth Kragan. If for some reason you have Speaker and Abyss Shark, this is probably the guy you're going into. This is the only numbered monster we're running in the deck, so it's the only XYZ target for Abyss Shark. This guy's effect is, you need 2 or 4, you need 2 level 4 water monsters, and all monsters on the field become water. This is niche, but it does mess with some interactions. For example, your opponent can't summon things like Chaos Angel if their monsters are all water monsters. So, It's useful. It's quite useful sometimes. Once per turn, during the main phase, quick effect, you can destroy a water monster your opponent controls, and if you do, inflict damage to your opponent equal to half the attack it had on the field. This is just a quick effect disruption tool that you can use. It's a destruction effect, so it's not the best, but it is non-targeting, so it is fine. If this Xyz summon card is destroyed, you can special summon Stealth Kraken Spawns from your extra deck up to the number of materials this card had, and then you can attach up to one water monster from your graveyard for each of those special summon monsters as material. Notably, because there's no detach effect from this guy, you'll have 2 material under him, which means you can go into 2 Stealth Kraken Spawns. These guys have once per turn during the main phase. Quick effect, you can destroy a water monster your opponent controls. Your opponent's monsters are no longer defaultly water because number 4 Stealth Kraken is gone, so you have to kind of luck into that sometimes. However, you should be able to still use their second effect. If this card, special summoned by the effect of a number Xyz monster, is destroyed, you can special summon other Stealth Kraken monsters in your graveyard up to the number of materials this card has. Then you can attach a water monster from your graveyard to each of those special summoned monsters as material. This means if one of these guys explodes, you can float back into Stealth Kraken and make the opponent's field water again. And additionally, you can give Stealth Kraken a material. But yeah, it's just an occasional like pop one and then you can pop another if your guy gets exploded. It's debatable how consistent this is, but it is annoying to the opponent, and it's another option that you can go into. Additionally, we're running a single copy of Abyss Dweller. It requires 2 level 4 monsters. While this card has material that's originally water, all water monsters you control gain 500 attack. Once per turn, you can detach a material from this card. Your opponent can activate any card effects in their graveyard this turn. This is a floodgate. This is just, your opponent isn't allowed to have card effects engrave. This is useful against some decks, not as useful against others. If you know what you're going up against, you can shut down a lot of decks. There's a reason this was run against tier limits. There's a reason this is being run against Unchained. For more casual formats, there's a reason this is run against like Eldritch. There's a lot of things that this counters, and it's just a really good card to have in your back pocket. Additionally, we have a Link monster, Era, the Water Charmer Gentle. This is, I have 2 cards in the field that don't go into anything, but also if they stay on the field, they're just dead weight, so I can link them off for this thing. This is a Link 2 that requires 2 monsters, including a water. It's always treated as a familiar possessed, which does not matter. You can target 1 water monster in your opponent's graveyard, special summon it to a zone this card points to. I will note that there is no water hand trap, really, that's any good. So 99% of the time, you will not encounter Water Charmer actually being able to use that steal effect. However, its floating effect is if this link summon card is destroyed by battle or is destroyed by an opponent's card effect while in its owner's monster zone, you can add 1 water monster with 1500 or less defense from your deck to your hand. This will allow you to search for a lot of cards. It allows you to search for your Ice Barrier monsters. It allows you to search for Abyss Shark. It allows you to search for Penguin Soldier. Don't search for Penguin Soldier. It allows you to search for General Wayne. Like, it allows you to get everything besides the Icejade Ran back out, but it's quite good. It will not let you search for Defender because Defender's defense is 16, and this thing's search is 1500 or less defense. However, putting this as part of your end board allows you to just float into something you might need. Side deck, Nibiru, the Primal Being. During the main phase, your opponent normal special summons 5 or more monsters. Quick effect, you contribute as many face-up monsters on the field as possible, and if you do, special summon this card from your hand, then special summon a Primal Being token to your opponent's field, which has the attack and defense of the combined attack and defense of all the tributed monsters. I'm side decking Nibiru because it turns off cards like Abyss Shark, because Abyss Shark requires all your monsters to be water, and it just doesn't synergize with the synchro plays, but it is a really powerful hand trap if you're fighting against the right deck. I also have a single copy of Warlock. Warlock's effect is while you control another Ice Barrier, both players must set spell cards before activating them and cannot activate them until their next turn. You can use Winds to summon this to your field alongside like a second Ice Barrier to set up a very basic floodgate board and just disrupt your opponent. It's not perfect, it's not amazing, but it is something you can do. Additionally, we're running 3 Effect Veiler. During the opponent's main phase, you can send this card from your hand to the graveyard, then target an effect monster your opponent controls, negate the effects of that monster until the end of turn. If your opponent's playing cards that are like, normal summon this, do the entire combo, this is a really good way to counter that. We're also running a copy of Heartbeast Feather Duster, destroy all spells and traps your opponent controls, in case your opponent's running a heavy spell trap deck. We're running 3-dimensional barrier, declare 1 monster type, Ritual, Fusion, Synchro, Xyz, or Pendulum for the rest of this turn. Neither player can special summon monsters of the declared type. Also negate the effects of all monsters of that type while they're on the field. The advantage we have is that there's not a lot of people playing Synchro decks right now. It's like, what is it, Sword Soul? So as long as we go into the Synchro half of the deck, we can use stuff like Dimensional Barrier to set up to counter like Pearly, which is explicitly Xyz, or we can counter stuff like Branded, which is explicitly a fusion deck. We cannot use this card to counter Link monsters, unfortunately, but there are still a lot of options that we have. We're also running Mirror the Ice Barrier because I want an excuse to run this thing because it's really cool. It's a quick play spell. During this turn, each time a card is banished from your hand, field, or graveyard by an opponent's activated monster effect, apply the following effects based on where the card was banished. Hand, banish 2 random cards from your opponent's hand. Banish up to 2 cards from your opponent controls, like their field. And graveyard, banish 2 cards from your opponent's graveyard. This is just a random punishment against decks that banish. This is probably going to be best against like Kashtira, but I don't expect a lot of people to be playing Kashtira because a Rise Heart is gone. Rip a Rise Heart. Nobody liked you a Rise Heart. I'm glad it's gone. We can finally play graveyard decks again, which is most of Yu-Gi-Oh! But this is just a fun little way to punish any decks that are like banishing monsters on field or banishing monsters in hand or banishing cards in hand. Like this is just a way to punish that. And it's like a continuous effect after it's applied. So it allows you to keep punishing that. This card also like prevents banishes, so like the deck's kind of set up to be okay against things that are banishing, and Mirror just helps ensure that your opponent gets hard punished if they do play a banish-based like playstyle. So that's the card by card for this deck. Let's go real quick into a couple example hands. Okay, so with this, I kind of want to show off just the basic Ice Barrier line, which is Summon Revealer, discard any card from hand to special summon either Squishy Boy or Defender. In this instance, we'll summon Squishy Boy. So Squishy Boy's on the field. Special summon Speaker from hand. And then from here, we have a lot of options. We can go into Bahamut Shark to make Toad. We can go into Stealth Kraken to control the field a little bit. We can also, which is what I prefer to do, manipulate Hexa's level to send Zujin and make Penguin Brave. I do this because I like Penguin Brave. It's a very funny card. Summon Brave, activate its effect to set Penguin Soldier, and then use the effect of Speaker to get out a single card material, and then go into the Water Charmer. This is a very basic little end board. That's a 3-card combo. It's Revealer, it's Speaker, and it's any other card. So we used Winds as the example so that we can have this on the second turn so that we can banish it to add an Ice Barrier back from grave to hand, which will be Revealer, so we can do our combos again. Zujin can also special summon itself from graveyard at this point, using something like Penguin Brave to decrease its level by 2. But this very basic board setup, off of just Revealer, Speaker, and any other card, will get us to Water Charmer. It'll get us to a level 6. If we're going first, then this. Penguin Brave is good. If we're going second, then Brionic, Dragon of the Ice Barrier is probably more ideal. Going first, this is a end board that lets us, when my opponent activates a monster effect, reflip over Penguin Soldier to bounce 2 cards, which can include itself, but 99% of the time you probably don't want to do that. And it gives us the ability to search for any part of our combo upon the death of Era. Very basic little board, but that's just a 3-card combo. So if we do not have something like Speaker, and instead we have like a Revealer and an Abyss Shark and any other card, we can do this kind of combo. Summon Revealer, discard a card to get out our Hexa. With the Abyss Shark, because all our monsters are currently water, we can special summon Abyss Shark and get out either Mini or Silent Angler. If you get out Mini, activate Hexa, send a 2, make these guys into Penguin Brave, special summon Mini from hand. You can go into Stealth Kraken, but if you do it the way I'm going to do it, you can actually get out Toad instead. So we're not going to activate Hexa's effect. Instead, we're going to go straight into Penguin Brave using those 2 guys. This is using Hexa and Abyss Shark. Abyss Shark is a 5 defaultly, and Hexa is a 1 defaultly, so you can just do it. Penguin Brave to go ahead and set Penguin Soldier. And then we're going to summon Silent Angler. We are now locked out of special summoning from the hand, but that's fine because we're going to use the extra deck. Instead of just linking the 2 away for Era and just like having this same end board, we can actually go into either Stealth Kraken to be able to pop a card during the opponent's turn, or what I prefer doing 99% of the time is going into Bahamut Shark, detaching for Revealer to summon Toadally Awesome. Now we have a way to bounce 2 monsters from the opponent's field back to their hand when they activate a monster effect. We also have Toadally Awesome, which will eat whatever destruction effect they try to use and let us steal a card. And when we use Toad to negate and destroy a card, we can then bounce back something like Revealer to be able to do our combos again. Or we can bounce back something like Abyss Shark to special summon it to add Mini back to hand to be able to go into more combos. But this is a very basic end board for if you have Revealer plus any card plus Abyss Shark. So here I want to show off what two different combos are. I want to show off how we can use basic ice barriers, and I want to show off what Icejade Ran can do. So Icejade Cradle can be discarded to activate Ran's effect, or one of these water monsters. I'm going to use Cradle to add Ran to hand. Icejade Cradle can search for as many Rans as you want, as long as you haven't played Ran yet, but the moment that Ran is on the field, it is something you control, and you can no longer add it, so Icejade Cradle becomes a dead card. This deck uses enough cards as discard fodder to where that's normally fine. Like, you can use it to discard for Revealer if for some reason you just can't search for Ran anymore. But you can also use it to discard for a lot of the ice barrier, like 6s and 7s. But for the most part, if you can, start with your Icejade Cradles and just add as many copies of Ran as you can. We're going to real quick just do the basic ice barrier combo. We're going to go ahead and use Hexa to go into Penguin Brave again, because this is first turn. So we're going to go into our 6, and off of Revealer and any other monster, we're going into Penguin Brave, and then Penguin Brave effect to set Penguin Soldier. This is the very basic Revealer plus anything combo. However, we now have Icejade Ran. Icejade Ran effect will allow us to discard an Icejade card or a water monster to special summon itself, and then we can special summon an Icejade token. This locks us into waters from the extra, which is fine for us, and we're going to use it to go into this guy, Icejade Gamir. I don't want to pronounce words I know I can't pronounce. This is a big boy, and I will attempt to demonstrate what it does against the opponent real quick. Icejade Ran plus any water monster or Icejade card will get you into this guy, and Revealer plus any other card in hand can get you Penguin Brave for a first turn play. So this is a game where we're going to go second. This game is going to be pure engine, essentially. Ignore the fact that I was going first. I can't control this little part of the simulator. But the opponent's going to go first for us, and we are going to not necessarily have access to all our engines. Like, Call by the Grave isn't going to be applicable. We have to break their board using our primary engine, the ice barriers. And this is like more than full combo for that. So with Revealer, we can normal summon Revealer. We can then use Revealer's effect to discard whatever card we want. We're going to do Defender, just because it's probably the least useful card of everything in hand. We're going to summon our Speaker, or our Hexa, sorry. And then we're going to summon our Speaker. And from here, we have two options. With this basic board setup, we can actually go straight into Trishula, Dragon of the Ice Barrier, which will let us banish a card from hand, field, and graveyard of the opponents. But if the opponent has a really big board, we can actually use Hexa's effect to send Defender to instead go into Trishula 0, which will not only have the banish 3 on board effect, but if this card gets destroyed on summon or something, we'll also have the ability to float back into Trishula, Dragon of the Ice Barrier, and this will have 3300 attack, and all the opponent's monsters will be negated, and their attacks will be halved. So that's just generically very useful. Additionally, with Speaker and Grave, I can banish it to make a token, and then I can activate Freezing Chains to special summon a Ice Barrier from Grave. Two options. If we think we're going to get hit again, we can go into Defender of the Ice Barrier to get a little bit of an attack, like defense, so like they won't be able to attack us for a bit. However, if we want to attack over something with Trishula 0, that is like a 3000 attack monster, we can summon Hexa back to make it to where our opponent's monsters lose 500 attack and defense. With a setup of 3 Ice Barrier monsters, because this token counts as like an Aqua normal monster, we can actually have Freezing Chains of the Ice Barriers effect proc, which means that our opponent's activated effects of monsters special summoned from the extra deck don't work. And I feel like this is very basic. This is just the Ice Barrier engine as well. You'll notice we drew a hand trap and a card that's limited to 1. Like, if we had any other form of combo, we could probably go further. But as a very basic thing, Ice Barriers are able to do that pretty consistently. Additionally, if we aren't afraid of anything from the extra deck, we can also just use these two as material to go into the Water Tremor, and then just swing in for more damage. But yeah, this is just a very basic. Your Ice Barriers by themselves can get you at least this far. Going second, like, this is a basic idea of what you can do. We're going to do the basic revealer thing. Revealer, discarding any card. We're going to discard Defender as just a generic example of a card. We're going to get out Hexa Spirit. We can then do a number of things. I have every single little combo that we've been talking about so far in hand. So, let this guy become a 6. We can, at this point, go into Brionic to bounce cards the opponent controls. If we special summon this guy, we can go into the Icejade. If we send Defender, we can go into Trishula 0, banish 3 cards on their field, and then have this massive body. If we leave Hexa the way he is, like as a level 1, we can go into Trishula Dragon of the Ice Barrier and banish 1 from hand, field, and graveyard. Just off of Revealer plus a card in hand plus Speaker. That's just the generic combo you can go into for that. For the sake of showing it off, I'm going to go into one of the Ice Barriers I don't normally go into, Brionic. I will use the effect of Brionic to discard a card to bounce a monster, but I'm going to banish Revealer to show off its effect to bounce a card. That Revealer banish is once per turn, so it's just the one time you get to use it, but it is still incredibly useful to be able to banish this from graveyard and still keep all the cards in your hand. Abyss Shark will be the next piece of the combo that we use. Abyss Shark grabbing Mini. At this point, it doesn't really matter what card we grabbed because we're going to be using it to feed Icejade. So we're going to discard that, special summon the Icejade, and then go into the token. From there, we're going to go into the level 10 Icejade monster. 90% of the time, I'd say. You're using Rand to go into the level 10. Additionally, we can go ahead and go into Stealth Kraken at this point. We could technically attack with the materials that are currently on Stealth Kraken first, but I'm going to assume that if you're in a game, the board state's actually going to be much bigger than this. We only bounced a single card with Brionic, so I'm going to assume that the board state's enough in a normal game where number 4 Stealth Kraken can still go and disrupt the opponent's play somehow. So this is the current going second board, and we can use these things to attack the opponent. I do not believe, if my math is correct, that this is lethal. However, this sets up for a pretty decent control board where we have access to protection from destruction and banishment. We have access to a destruction effect on the opponent's turn, and when this thing floats, we'll go into Stealth Kraken spawns, which will then allow us to just kind of loop between these. Going second, I would not actually recommend Bahamut Shark into Toad, just because 90% of the time, it's probably not worth it. By the time you get to that point in the combo, you're probably getting blown out a little bit. You're getting interrupted by the time Bahamut Shark hits the field. That's going to be the target that they go for. So if you summon Kraken, and that becomes the target that they try to destroy, or disrupt or something, you can use its effect, because it's a quick effect to destroy a water monster the opponent controls, and all their monsters become water while it's on the field. Thank you for watching. This was kind of inspired by the fact, as I've been mentioning throughout the video, Ice Barrier is actually getting new support. This thing is insane. It's currently only OCG, so I don't know when this is coming in. I assume it won't be in 2023. It might be during Christmas. I assume it might be during January or something. But this thing is a once per chain. If your opponent special summons a monster, special summon an Ice Barrier from your hand, deck, extra deck, or graveyard, and then change the opponent's monster to defense position. And you can do that twice per turn. And then if it leaves the field, you can special summon an Ice Barrier Synchro from the extra deck and treat it like a Synchro summon, which means it floats into Trishula 0. The new Ice Barrier support is insane, especially since this is the exact same materials you use to get into Gamir, which means instead of Gamir, you can always just summon the thing that makes Ice Barriers broken. Oh my gosh, okay. When the new support comes out, the deck's going to be even more nuts. That is the reason why I'm holding this on the side, because one of the guys you can special summon is this guy, which makes it so your opponent's monster effects on field require discards. It's dumb, it's beautiful, I love it. But I wanted to make this video before all the new support came out, because I wanted to showcase that even without that new support, this deck is still a lot of fun and still pretty decent, especially with stuff like Penguin Brave being able to be incorporated into mainline strategies. It's good. I really like this. But I will also make a video when all the busted support comes out and I get to playtest that properly against real decks. I'll showcase that as well. So yeah, that was the main inspiration for this. Thank you for watching all the way to the end, and I will catch you guys next time. Bye.